Oh, good morning. Thank you to just everybody real quick for taking the time to do this morning. I really appreciate everybody's work on this film. So just being able to ask one of you a question to start this out, setting the tone for that, that's really tough to do just because I was, much like Robert was saying in the beginning, I was absolutely floored by this movie. It was an incredibly impressive film. And this is just something that you don't see films like this. And this is an incredibly important film. But one of the things that I was struck with right away, Marcelo, it was the simplicity and beauty of the score in this. I think it's deceptive with how small it is at times and just how subtle. Could you talk a little bit about just the process of the themes of this film?
Yes, absolutely. Hi. Well, Antoine wanted us to focus, and we talked a lot about focusing both on the large and the small, both within the sound of the film, where you have smaller chamber pieces with just a little bit of voice and percussion, to very large orchestral and choir things. One of the sort of the code name for the film for a lot of us was Sacred Motivation. So the spiritual part of this film was integral, and of course that's something music can do very well. The voices were meant to convey the spirituality of both the Peter's ancestral sort of spiritual beliefs combined with his Christian beliefs. So we kind of go back and forth with the music. And from that very first shot, that beautiful, beautiful shot of the forest that goes into the plantation, the goal of the music was to set the stone for this mysterious place where nature is integral to the story and to everything that is happening, but also with spirituality and also not shying away from the darkness. So Antoine did not want us to ever make this pretty or sort of sugarcoat what was going on there. So that sort of somber but yet very beautiful opening in the photography, but also in the music, I feel like it's what sets up our tone for the movie, musically speaking, and visually, I would say too.
All right, thank you for that. I am Mia Barrington with blackfilm.com. My question is for Ms. Francine. I was curious to know what were some of the biggest challenges for you with creating this costume design, and did shooting in black and white, how did that affect your process, if any?
Well, I think one of the challenges that I was facing as a costume designer was a lot of the cast members were not cast yet. So it was about trying to really create the costumes with a character, not knowing who that actor was going to be. So I had to move ahead and just really put a lot of things into work. And when that person was cast, to try and just fit it to them as when the person was cast, really. So, and I think a lot of the challenge was, and really speaking with Antoine and conferring with Bob and also Naomi, it was a really group effort in order to attain the realism that Antoine wanted to reach. He didn't want this to be something that is some type of romantic thing going on about what's the enslaved people or what slavery was or any of this, but he wanted it to be realistic. And it was I think very challenging in trying to get the aging just right, the over dyeing and everything, into just to make sure that the fabrics, the clothing, everything was working properly in order to just really have all of that, I would say, blending in with Bob's wonderful photography and Naomi's sets and everything else, and even with the sound, with Ed's wonderful sound mixing. So it was all a group effort, and the makeup, the hair, and I had such wonderful people in the costume department that were the ager dyer, who was incredible, Darren Mazzari, and Harlan Glenn, who was just an amazing military historical technical advisor. So it was I think that aspect of it was really kind of interesting. It was challenging, but it was really rewarding.
Hello, my name is Patrick Gibbs from Slug Magazine, that's Salt Lake Underground. Robert, you have been one of the gods of cinematography to me ever since The Horse Whisperer. So it's a pleasure to be talking to you. Shooting this film in black and white was so clearly the right approach on so many levels, including giving the film a more visual connection to the original photograph of Peter. But I was curious if you could talk a little bit about the decision to go near black and white and what motivated that.
Well, we started thinking it would be in color. And Antoine, myself, and almost virtually everyone felt that black and white would be a better alternative. But studio was not along with that process completely at that initial start. And we just, I think everyone here felt that the black and white added exactly what you just said, an element that attached itself to a time period better than, at least I felt better than if we had put it in color. And Antoine was very pivotal in making that choice and that decision to alter the moments of color that you briefly see, whether it be the greens of a grass or the red of a flag, or et cetera, et cetera. And we try to use that as tones. And that's primarily the reason we did it, is because it just felt like it was the best way to approach the story very cleanly.
Thank you.
Michael?
Hello, Michael Bergeron with Screen Reflections. So I have a question, and just anybody who would like to chime in, but I guess specifically the VFX supervisor, Mr. Legato, how did you shoot the alligator sequence? What was involved with that?
The alligator sequence was, what was mostly involved is shooting basically every technique that we had. One was shooting above water with a legacy created alligator that was manipulated, it was sort of puppeteered, but that's for very quick little moments, the tail splashing, you see a little bit of the head. Then probably the most clever thing we did is we built a LED wall with a giant, what amounts to a giant aquarium in front of it. So the background or the swamp background was projected on this LED wall, which basically, if you picture an aquarium in front of a television set, that's ultimately what we did. And then it allowed for filtered water for Will to be able to open his eyes cleanly and easily and not get hurt, and be able to wrestle with the legacy alligator that was now much smaller, more of the head puppeteering, where he can stab it and we could have blood come out of it and things like that. And then occasionally, just so you didn't feel like it was so limited to those types of tight shots, we had like 2 or 3 key computer generated shots where we used the same background that we used as the background behind Will, so it could intercut cleanly with it. And we had a computer generated Will that was based on his performance in terms of what he was doing, to allow you to see a little bit wider shot. So the sum total of all the shots, from the real shots that we did in the swamp to the LED wall to full CG shots, were all mixed together as cleanly as I could possibly do it. So it was kind of a quick in, quick out, and you didn't really get to study any one technique for very long before it starts to show its limitations. So that was pretty much how we did it. And the hard part was, in this kind of film, because it's such a beautifully made film, you don't want to do anything that is artificial at all, so you have to try to go for that extra bit of realism at every moment. And it was really key to have Will actually perform most of his close-up work instead of doing it as a CG thing or as a stunt double or anything else like that. So went to great pains to make it easy for him to be able to perform it and be able to intercut. And Conrad did a nice job of piecing all these pieces together that we created. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Hello, I'm Boris Cartier, Mulderville. Marcelo, what must be for you a great collaboration between a director and a composer?
I think that for me, a great collaboration is where you feel that there's a lot of trust and there's a very safe space to try things, you know, and to Antoine is extremely open to musical ideas. He reacts emotionally. It's always about the emotion. Whatever concepts we discussed before, everything kind of goes to the background once he hears something, and it's whether he's getting that hit of emotion that he's looking for. And we've been working for quite some time now. This is our I counted is our 6th project together. We had a very, very good shorthand. And mostly Antoine really is a director that understands, respects, and loves the power of music in his films and music, period. Antoine, a lot of times, randomly, he will text me a piece of music that he likes, whether we're working on something or not. So that's another way that he communicates, but things that are very different from what we're ultimately going to do. But he sort of communicates with me through sometimes pieces of old classical pieces or movies that he likes, but mostly it's a very safe and creative space. And I have to say that Conrad was also an integral part of this. I feel like it was kind of a 3-way thing when we were looking at music. It was always the 3 of us together, and it's sort of the ideal 3-way collaboration for music for me.
Thank you.
My name is Dan Skipallen from disappointmentmedia.com. I want to know how, whoever wants to answer this is fine, is how did you get the look of the costumes and the splashes of color where it comes as far as the cinematography goes? How did you get that all to match up to where it looks seamless in the overall product of the film?
Rob, you should join this one.
Okay. Well, a part of it, what we did when we were coming up with the look for the film, is that we would take, instead of going full black and white, we would turn into black and white first, adjust the different colors, red, green, and blue contributions to that black and white. Like if you had a red shirt on and you were to change the contribution of that particular color layer, you can adjust its gray value to anything that you want. We're able to kind of very fine-tune match it, and then mix back. This was Bob's idea when we first were coming up with, should it be black and white or color, is to mix back a little bit of the color back in, and then on top of there, if we want to add a little red or a little green or a little from the foliage, we could do that. But so what we had is complete control, as if it was all black and white. We could change any costume or any shade to whatever gray value seemed to make the most sense or look the most pleasing and or match, and then mix back color to that. So we're able to kind of creatively create this palette that Bob would sit in with Daly's colorist, Benny, and every day make these subtle artistic adjustments that now we should add a little more green, now we should add a little more blue, maybe we should make the skies go dark. So that mixed with the costumes and the art direction, we're able to very finely control it for artistic reasons, above everything else. So Bob would sit with the colorist every day and make these very subtle adjustments based on the drama that he and Antoine had worked out. What was important? What do we need to see? And it was a fun collaboration. It was very fun to do it and come up with something, because the look was so wonderful for the film that we were very excited. Every day we'd come out of dailies and we would find something that we really liked, that really played the drama very well.
I agree with that.
Thank you.
Francine here for costumes. I think I agree with Rob, and because my collaboration with Bob Richardson and Antoine, and also with Naomi, it was I think every day, or at least once a week or whatever, pretty much every day, is to find out what these colors are going to do on screen, how much over dyeing, or if it has to be dyed at all, or aging. And like I said before, how all of that blends in and just makes it appear to be seamless. So I think with Bob's wonderful photography and with Naomi's sets and all of that, really a collaboration of it, and also ultimately with Antoine's vision of what that is and what that could be, and the sense of as Peter is running, and all of the way that he is going through a lot of the terrain and a lot of the sense of what he is encountering along the way. All of that has to be really reviewed on how does that work and how does that translate with the costumes and what happens with them along the way. So it's I really feel by viewing the film, it really did it made it work. And a lot of that is because of collaborating with all of the department heads and people who really know their profession, and just making it all work together. Because I think we all felt that it was a story. It's a story that was really had to be told, and wanted it to be told realistically. And that is one of the major things too.
I'd also like to add something to this. The choice of the way color was used here, that Bob and Rob have just been discussing, that there's kind of a distancing that happens with black and white that also creates intimacy. So there's kind of this contradiction in terms that works very beautifully to allow you to both receive the movie and also kind of look at it as a time out of time experience. I also want to say that Francine and Cynthia Jeunesse, the decorator, and to the greatest extent, and then to a little bit myself, everybody did a lot of research, Antoine as well, and I'm sure Bob and Rob and everybody, but everybody did a huge amount of research so that we all had a pretty good visual understanding, at least, of what this world was, enough of what this world was in order to try to recreate it. Also, the landscapes that we use, the place that we chose to film the movie, the landscapes are magnificent, and Antoine had said that he wanted the movie to be both beautiful and brutal. And the landscapes, as we explored them, scouting for locations, they speak eloquently to us. And I think that, the land had a little bit to say to us as well about what may have happened in the past, even our experience of how rugged it was to be living and working there. But so the combination of the historical research, the distancing, the poetic distancing, the listening to the land, all of these things, I think, contributed to the unity of the end result, and of course, Antoine's driving vision.
I'm Fernando Fernandez for Fern TV. This question is for Cindy, the set decorator. What was it like to, for your role to be in sort of this like historical piece, and what was most inspiring doing your role for the film?
It was, for me, it was pretty exciting to do the research, to study photographs, excuse me, that were taken at the time, and to actually work in places where a lot of this history had taken place. It's everything about it was pretty exciting as far as being in Louisiana near these battlefields in some of these plantation areas where a lot of this actually historically would have taken place. So there was a great sense of connection with a lot of this.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Samuel Leggett with JVS Media Productions. This is a question in relation to sound. The swamp, the atmosphere, it kind of comes alive very seamlessly. And I wanted you guys to kind of talk towards that, because it kind of feels like as Peter or Will is going through the swamp, like you hear all the beautiful and yet deadly things all around him, whether it's like the trees, whether it's something creeping through the swamp, whether even in the water. Like, sound design felt very fluid and felt very natural. But what were some of the difficulties between that? Like, I mean, whether it's weather conditions, whether it's being in the water, whether it's wind. I was curious y'all's, take on how difficult that process was, because it becomes, in and of itself, the swamp becomes a character in and of itself, the way you guys kind of transform it. But I can imagine it was also very difficult as well. So.
Well, I guess I can start this one off. I handled a lot of the sound effects in the editorial and mixing side of the sound. And, it was very challenging for Ed Novick, our production sound mixer, just to capture clean dialogue. But when the tracks came to us, there wasn't a whole lot of atmosphere that was really usable, given, it was period and there were a lot of generators and stuff like that. And Ed's primary goal is to capture the dialogue as clean as possible. And so it was really a large blank slate, blank canvas for us to tackle. Of course, Antoine was looking to, make the swamp almost an extension of the labor camps, in that it's, a very dangerous place. Death is around every corner. But it's also, like some of our visual crafts have mentioned, that it was also a very beautiful place. So early on, we pulled a lot of sounds, even before we saw a picture, to send to Conrad in the cutting room, that would evoke certain emotions that we felt would, help the swamp come alive. Tension, sounds that are dangerous, sounds that are mysterious. We tried to be respectful to the geographical location, but we also didn't let that hinder us as far as, whether the insects were, accurate to that location. If it gave it that edge we were looking for, it was fair game, even if it was a slight bit more, tropical in nature or something like that. So it is story first, drama first, emotion first, because that's how Antoine tends to react to those situations. And, we just tried to make it a nice, dense, lush place that just helped drive the story. So, we kept it thick and large when we needed to, but we also would scale it back when appropriate. I don't know if anybody else has anything they want to add to that. So we have several.
I'll add a little bit to it. Our Foley team had quite a bit to do, since it was such a large blank canvas, just to get the actors' movement through the swamp, and going from all those different surfaces, even within the same shot. We had quite a bit of work to do to make it feel real, that gritty, unflinching realism that Antoine wants. He wants it. He doesn't want to be taken out of the story. He wants to let the emotion take over. So we were tasked with making it feel as real as possible.
Thank you.
Hi, Chris Maynard with Following Films. I had a question for Conrad, or actually start with just a quick statement. I don't know if you saw my 7-year-old son walked in here a few minutes ago. And it's not often that there's someone that I'm talking to makes me look cool in his eyes, but the fact that it was you, he came in and had to point it out because he's obsessed with Titanic and watches it probably once a week. And so anybody that's ever touched that movie, when I get a chance to talk to them, it's just something he comes in and has to see them. So thank you for making me look cool to my 7-year-old.
Rob
So,
Legato is with us, and he certainly had a hand in that.
that he did. Yeah. And so, but the question I had for this is all the craft side of this film. It's very bold, but it just that people have talked a lot about the black and white, the visual sense of this, but the sound design of this thing, as well as the pacing of this film and the way it's put together, but it's all invisible. And if it was drawing attention to itself, I don't think it would work. The average viewer might not necessarily know why something is unique looking, but they'll be pulled in by it. And I think that the pacing of this film is something that's really important because it's something that it could feel like a slog. This movie could feel like homework. It's something that could really just beat you up too much. And I feel like you've really balanced that well, where it has the emotional impact, but it never overstays its welcome. And it's a film that absolutely does show restraint at times for as bold as it is. I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about the keeping the flow of this movie, I guess, propulsion of this.
Well, thank you for the compliments. I appreciate it. I'm pretty proud of the work that all of us have done. For me, I was spared the physical issues that production, of course, experienced between, the environments, hurricane, COVID, all kinds of things exacerbating the process. But so editorially, in spite of the difficult nature of the film, it was a pleasure for me as an editor, particularly the second act, which there's basically an absence of dialogue. So I had a lot of wonderful images to choose from, and it's very subjective, how to structure it. And that, honestly, that area was probably the most difficult to balance and structure. How long do I stay with Peter's wife? How long do I stay with Peter? How long do I stay with Fassel? There's these 3 different ingredients swirling around, and trying to figure out that balance and how long we can stay in any scene was particularly challenging. But it was great fun. As Dave had mentioned, a lot of it was shot essentially MOS because Ed Novick, our production sound mixer, could not possibly record the detail that is required to give it life. And so it was very freeing for me. It's not driven by dialogue in a lot of instances. There's no roadmap. It's more documentary-like and to a degree. But my sound team elevated my work tremendously. The detail and character of environments, and as was mentioned, the Foley, which is kind of a mundane to most folks ingredient, but in this film, really essential to give it, to siphon off some of the, what could be considered tedium of, running through a swamp. So there's all these distinguishing ingredients. But interestingly, the battle at the end of the film was probably the easiest for me to put together, and I was incredibly impressed by the material when I received it. I just couldn't believe what everyone in production had achieved in a very short period of time. But the detail of all those ingredients sonically are so important to the film. I have to give everyone in the sound department particularly a lot of credit.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Bob, I was wondering, you spoke at the beginning, you talked about crying when you saw this, and I cried. And in your variety interview, you talked about some reluctance to join the project, whether you were right for it, stepping into it as a white cinematographer into telling this story. As we've just kind of touched on, for me, this is a movie that is a heavy subject matter, but it's also a crucial one. I wish everyone would see this film right now, because there's so much national debate on the subject of whether we talk about this era and stuff. What kind of responsibilities did you feel going into telling this story? And what were some of the emotional challenges, and what were some of the biggest technical challenges in telling that story?
Excuse me. I definitely questioned, as a white cinematographer, Caucasian cinematographer, to tackle a subject that included slavery. I don't think this is I wouldn't say this is a film about slavery. I think it's also a very action-oriented film, in somewhat akin to Apocalypto or others. As I watched it today, first time, as I said, I had a full score, and the first time I'd seen it, I've seen it many, many, many times, but this was the first time with everything. And it took me down a number of times. It took me down actually in the first scene with the family, with them just sitting and looking at each other and talking. Peter talked about God, love, family, etc. And it took me down later a number of times. It was complicated initially to think, should you be the person to tell a story? Or should someone else make this film as a cinematographer? I mean, at a certain point, talking to Antoine, I decided I wasn't afraid, and I should tackle it. And the technical issues you're asking were phenomenal. To shoot in a swamp, many people suggested initially it's built on stage and things like that, but you never have the variety that we all found. And as I have to be very honest, but as I watched the movie today, I was just blown away. I mean, I love everyone's work in it. It's like it's haunting. The music's haunting. Everything's haunting. The sound design. There are moments when Antoine lets something play, like in full length, and only the sound of words, almost virtually nothing, and then it be heightened. And it just took me. I was constantly like, my hand was on top of my leg. I was like squeezing my leg, and also squeezing the woman I was with, like breaking her hand. She constantly had to pull the hand away. It's like, fuck this, man. This is a good fucking movie. And I was right next to Antoine. And I turned towards him and I said, Antoine, man, this is so fucking good. I haven't seen it. It's like, I've seen it so many times, but I've never seen it mixed. And the mix is, must say. And also, I want to throw something out to Rob. Rob wasn't just VFX. Rob was also second unit. And he's highly, highly important in terms of the respect of what the film looks like, not only from a visual effects point of view, but from color point of view. He was always involved in creating that lookup table that we utilized. And he also directed numerous shots. They vastly improved the work I did. I mean, Rob is truly brilliant. And thank you, Rob.
Geez, Bob, thank you for that. That's I'm kind of moved just by hearing that. That's wonderful. I mean, my job, which I find rather daunting, is to match or try to match Bob and Antoine at their peak of their careers and do something that doesn't let them down in terms of, it feels like they shot that portion of the movie, that those intentions were their intentions. And that's the super challenge of doing a film with, not to just return the compliment of somebody as talented as Bob, is he sets the look and tone. Antoine sets the look and tone of what the action is, and then you try to pick up the pieces and deliver in kind, something that if nothing else, not be disappointed in, even if it doesn't necessarily improve or would be better or than what they would have done, just to do it sort of at that level where maybe the audience doesn't notice that there was a different person, behind the camera or whatever. So, I mean, it's a high compliment indeed if no one noticed that I did anything, and it felt like some of Bob's spectacular work and Antoine's spectacular directing on the film. If I might be able to add to a little bit, I found the whole story extremely moving and also sad for me, in that it should have been a triumph, just the end of slavery, but it was the beginning of the next 100 years or 200 years of something that we're still going through. And so I can never be totally like, oh, we'll make a heroic moment that is a heroic moment, because it's just the beginning of the next phase of how terrible people can be to other human beings. So every time we shot, there was always an element of sadness that wasn't a total victory. Just the emancipation is not a total victory. It is just the beginning of the journey. And I found that particularly moving and difficult to shoot as a Caucasian, cinematographer or second unit director. It was like just the beginning. This is not the end of that. It's the beginning of the next phase of that. So I found it, the whole experience, rather moving, and felt quite honored to be a part of it. I owe that to Bob. Bob asked me to join the crowd, which is also a compliment in itself. And it was a really moving portrait that we were creating. And again, I just, it was a sort of an honor to help participate in that and hopefully tell the story in a way that moves other human beings. So
thank you. And if I could just quickly say, I had a once in a lifetime chance to get a private screening of this film in the theater, and it's so emotional. And I just want to thank each of you for this film and the work that you did on it. It's an amazing artistic, spiritual, and personal experience that you should all be incredibly proud of.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are.
Thank you.
Michael Bergeron with Screen Reflections. Collectively, could I ask everybody, was principal photography in one lump sum, or were things broken up? Because you mentioned the hurricane. Did that actually halt production? Did they have to rebuild sets?
It definitely interrupted our shooting. I don't know if it was a month, approximately a month for the shooting.
Yeah.
4 to 5
Also,
weeks,
there
I
was,
remember.
and there was also the movement from one state to another state based upon decisions that were political. And that was another break, but we didn't actually start the film, but we had to reignite it, find all new locations in Louisiana after leaving Georgia. So basically it was one large piece, but there was a break because obviously of the weather and the amount of devastation that was caused to almost all of our landscapes that we were utilizing. They're all destroyed. It was center of the hurricane.
The
And
oak
life-
trees, the old oak trees at the Evergreen plantation where we filmed Peter's were really, really damaged. So they didn't come down, but they were terribly damaged by the hurricane. The only happy result of the hurricane, in my view, was the fact that the cotton that we had planted had a chance to bloom. And had there been no hurricane and no 1 month push, we would have been putting fake cotton, little cotton balls all over the cotton plants. But nice.
The other lucky thing that happened, I think because of the hurricanes, we found a new location for the sea battle area where Fassel gets killed. It was like, it was literally probably a mile or two away from where the real battle took place. So it was sort of a lucky break. I think Bob found that, and we found it after after whatever we were considering shooting was probably ruined in the hurricane. So we actually found what amounts to a great location and the real location for that. So that was sort of one could say there was a happy accident, that was one of them.
I remember seeing that Mississippi River for the first time and going, oh my God, this is wonderful. And then when I found out it was literally, as you say, a mile away, it was very, very impressive, quite beautiful.
I guess I should give some credit to Maria Berniak here, who was our location manager and who she found that river and a lot of other of the really good locations. She was unstoppable. I'd like to give a shout out to Maria.
Boris.
Hello, Conrad. What can you tell us about your long collaboration with Antoine Fuqua and about your main challenge on this film?
I'm sorry, what was the second question?
And your main challenge on this film?
Well, I mean, Antoine and I have done remarkably 7 films together, beginning with Training Day. There were several years where we didn't work together. We were kind of going down different roads, but I love working with him. He gives me an enormous amount of freedom editorially. The communication is wonderful and very comfortable because he's quite open and receptive. If I decide to try something that he hadn't necessarily designed, he's very receptive. He's also remarkably helpful when we get into the director cut mode and begin to shape the film. He comes up with some wonderful ideas that I never thought of. And it's a treat, you know. He's so accepting of a good percentage of my work, and then we'll add icing on the cake, essentially, with something that I'd never considered. It just pushes the film into a better direction. He's just really lovely for me as a collaborator. I'm sorry, what was the second question again?
And what was your main challenge on this film?
Oh, the main challenge, yes.
Yeah.
Well, as I said before, I think it really was the second act, which is essentially when all the characters make an escape from the railroad work camp, and up to the time that Fassel is shot. That whole roughly second act area, because again, it's absence of dialogue. There's no specific guidelines that I have to necessarily follow other than telling the story in the most interesting way. So it's very freeing because it's just visual. And, you know, what do I like? What do I want to see? What do I need to see next? You know, it was challenging because of that. I'm not sure I'm communicating this well, but it is more, as I said, documentary-like. It required the most experimentation and balance editorially, more trial and error than other areas. So, but in spite of the difficult subject matter, as an editor, absolutely wonderful to work on.
Thank you very much.
This question,
Roman police.
This question is for anybody that wants to answer it. Given the nature of Will going to these talk shows and being on the red carpet and discussing this, the one thing he mentioned that I took away from these interviews and so far is, I don't want to take away from the people that made this movie, the people behind the scenes that made this movie that aren't me. And I really was like thrown aback by that, because of that. Wow, he's really championed the people that made this movie. And to me, you all deserve being championed. Is there anybody that would like to comment on his comments, and also how the actor is standing up for the people behind the scenes, which to me is fantastic?
Well, I think we all certainly appreciate it immensely. We all know how much work was put into make this, and how we all supported Antoine. You know, I know the production end of things, I was spared, of course, being an editorial and distant from Louisiana, but Antoine had so many challenges on this film, and that sad incident with Will at the Academy Awards was like one more difficulty to overcome. So I know all of us certainly appreciate him acknowledging our work. He couldn't have been more lovely in my dealings with him, which were primarily in post-production. I don't know.
I only got to work with him a couple times, but I got the impression of, just from working with him on this film, primarily, that his comment is how he really feels, because he's appreciative every day of and excited by like the shots that Antoine and Bob would create, and he would see playback of, and all the contributions of everybody on the film, production design, costume, and everything. So he was always, in my view, always in everyone's corner, everybody collaborating, producing the movie. So not terribly surprised that that's the comment he would make about this, and not wanting whatever happened to diminish the contribution he felt everybody made while we're making the movie, not just as a response or nice thing to say afterwards, but as something that he feels, rather deeply. And as a performer, he's appreciative of what the art form of everybody else who makes him look good in the process. He doesn't take it for granted. At least that's my impression.
No, I agree with you totally too. I think that Will's spirit is one of giving. He was remarkable to work with. He led us. He sat on the set in the most difficult of days and waited out. I mean, he didn't go trailer. He was with us. We all appreciated it, and of course he continued that despite what took place. And he's a true gentleman.
I remember when we were shooting the pit scene where we threw the older gentleman into the pit, I think he offered them something like $5,000, everybody who had to now lay in that pit in the hot sun. So he appreciated even that work that the extras were doing and the other people were in it. So he was always involved and always appreciative of the contribution and the difficulty of shooting this film, which was pretty difficult to shoot, and in very difficult high heat and thunderstorm and lightning conditions that would interrupt shooting every so often. So he was a very generous man, I have to say.
I totally agree with everyone that Will Smith has got to be one of the kindest, warmest, just understanding people I've ever worked with in front of the camera. And he was just a very gracious person, and at times when he was just so appreciative of everyone's work. And for me, I think, and the type of character that this man was going through all these months, he is a human being first, and his acting and everything, okay, comes next. But he was so professional and such a gracious person, and who knows how that affected him later. But as far as a working with all of us and just working with him in the fittings and on the set. And there was not one time that he did not have a kind word for anyone and everyone. So I feel that he is just really the epitome of professionalism. He is the epitome of what it is to be a humble and gracious filmmaker. And I just feel very honored to work with him any day, anytime, and to work with all of these wonderful filmmakers that are here now. And I'd like to say a comment to Bob Richardson. Bob Richardson, I do not care what color you are. To me, you had your vision, and what you did on this film just brought it all to a reality that the entire world needs to know about and needs to see. And for as far as I'm concerned, you are an American, artistic, incredible cinematographer that Antoine, in his vision, knew that he needed that hand in order to make this, to bring this to the screen. And also Naomi's wonderful sets, and Cindy and Ed, all of the collaboration, everyone, Rob. I mean, it doesn't matter where you're coming from, what your skin tone is, what your gender, what your age. It is about really having the compassion and knowing and seeing that something's wrong in this picture. There's something wrong when one human being has to brutalize another. And so in having that vision and having that scope, you really brought it, everyone brought it out and just brought it to a reality. And I commend everybody. Thank you so much.
I
Thank
got
you.
you.
Well said. Thank you, Francine.
I just want to make it universal that Will, yes, incredibly gracious, incredibly gracious, beautiful to work with. I think whatever happened is feet of clay. We all have them.
I'd like to add also that being part of the mix, we're at the very end, and Will did come in for a playback. When we got everything basically there, it's 95% done, and Will came in and was so appreciative. When the lights came up, he loved what he had heard and seen. And it was very gratifying for us because we sort of took inspiration, the slap aside, we took inspiration from what was on the screen, thanks to everybody here and what you had done, that we felt we needed to step up the sonic, what's compatible with that and meet that. And we had it's such an important film. We had such a great time doing it. Will was appreciative, and we're very appreciative of Will and what he did in his performance, that we all felt we had to rise to that level. And it was such a pleasure to meet him and to get his feedback and to see how he responded to our work, because we're all responding basically to his.
Alrighty, thank you all so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your morning or evening. Thank you so much.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Thank you.